Welcome students to week 9. So these last 2 weeks, I'm not asking you to do additional assignments beyond your last 2 major assignments, which I think are sufficient. So the inputs that I'm giving you are really about answering questions that you've brought to me. So this week we're doing a video, I'm doing a video, on lessons from community organizing for congregational transformation. And this video responds to the number of you who've asked me questions about the how of the transformation of a congregation's perspectives, attitudes, commitments, and actions around immigration. Next week, I'm going to go deeper into some of the questions around intersectionality and racism. So those are the 2 videos I've been asked to make. And this is the first one. So let's go. So one of the major problems that you run into in any congregation is that there's a small group of people who are committed in some way to community care, to mercy, to justice, and that little small frustrated group of people tries to do everything that there is to be done in that arena, tries to meet every need. And that group, I should have said small, frustrated, and exhausted group of people does it all. So really the first step in engaging the larger congregation in any significant way is to build a strong team. And that team needs to go beyond the usual suspects. And that has to be an intentional process of recruitment. So who do you recruit? Well, sometimes you can get referrals from the pastor. Say, who do you know who you think cares about these things? Not who is public about it, not who is an activist, but who do you know in the women's group, in the youth group, that you think has a great heart, that you think might be able to be involved with this work in some way? Sometimes you can go to the pastor for it. Sometimes you need to do a bunch of one-on-ones. You need to sit down with people and have a heart-to-heart talk and find out what it is that they feel moves them most deeply. When they look out into the world, what breaks their heart? What do they worry about? What do they feel like they have gifts to, what gifts do they feel like they have to contribute that maybe they're not even utilizing or no one's asking them to share? So you need to get to know people in your congregation. And you pick somebody that you think for some reason might be likely, and then they will lead you to someone else. And if they get excited, they're going to go in, you encourage them to go do one-on-ones. And so little by little, you begin to find people that will make up your team. Always look for people who are directly affected, and look for people who have a spiritual gift of mercy or justice. In the process, and I always say, find a prayer warrior. In your congregation, there is a prayer warrior, at least one, who has a particular heart for mercy and justice, who might have a particular heart for migrants. And then you've heard me say this a number of times, but I want to put it here in context. You have to find your Gamaliel, you have to find someone in leadership who is empathetic. So you got to build a diverse team. You have to build a strong team. You should have some young people in it. You should have some newbies or elderly people who don't have a lot to do, because you have a lot to do. So, you want to make sure you have a good, strong team. You don't be too quick to give it a name. It'll name itself. It could be the hospitality team. It could be a lot of different names. But you want to look for a team of people who could potentially move this forward. Secondly, and this is really important for any of us who are used to leadership, the iron rule of organizing is never do anything for anyone that they can do for themselves. That's the iron rule. Because you actually weaken people when you do something for them when they could do it. So it's really important to delegate appropriately and to actually make the whole team conscious of that. That the goal is not to do it. The goal is to find someone to help you do it, whatever it is. And a healthy organizing effort builds trees. You have the branch, and the branch has the little branches, is each person is responsible for a certain number of people that they engage and who work with them. Then you need, as the very first thing that you do, you need to do intentional listening. So you need to go out into your community, find out who's doing this work, get to know them. If you know immigrants, take some time to listen to them, to hear their stories. Listen to people in your church, listen to God. I know a group who started this work and spent 6 months in prayer before they did anything else. So you need to listen to discern how you're going to move forward in a way that will best engage others and have impact. And those are always the left hand and the right hand of organizing. You want to engage as many people as possible, not only in participation, but in some kind of leadership. And you want to have objective impact. So those things are always a little bit in tension, but you have to hold both those goals. The Rockwood Training Institute says we don't need a leader to get us out of this mess. We need 1 million leaders to get us out of this mess. And that's how organizing works. So start out by listening in prayer to discern the best next step moving forward. Then the second problem that we run into a lot is people get very enthusiastic and at the beginning, and they bite off more than they can chew, and then it all dissipates. So it's very important to start off with a bite-sized piece and let it grow. Do something that is relatively easy and relatively fun to start off, right? That makes people feel good. Don't worry about not achieving an enormous amount initially. You don't need to do that. You need what we call small wins. So you need a small win. And then what you're going to do with every activity that you do is you move into something that we call the reflection action cycle, which is that you come back, you sit down together as a team, you celebrate, always celebrate before you criticize. Celebrate what you've done, even if it had lots of problems, and then think about what you learned from it. Think about what you learned that would help you not just be able to do the same thing again better, but maybe to be able to do something else or something more. As part of that reflection action cycle, you're going to begin to think about how you can work in partnership, because to do more than something bite-sized means to do it in partnership and to do it contributing your unique resources to a partnership. So in your listening process, you will have encountered potential partners. So this is the time, as you're going through this reflection action cycle, to decide to work in partnership. And then you have to develop leaders. So let's talk a little bit about what developing leaders means. I'm a little bit infamous as an intern supervisor because I throw interns into the deep water. And I throw them into the deep water because that's how they learn. So I remember I had this young woman, Taylor, who came from the Midwest, and she was actually very articulate, but she was very timid. And so I was sending her out to do a church presentation with an immigrant and with somebody who was a veteran, who had been doing this a lot. And the veteran got sick. And so Taylor said, I guess we're going to cancel it, right? And I said, wrong. You're going to go do it with the immigrant. And she went white, but she did it. And she came back a leader. She came back a leader on another level. So you have to be very intentional about how you help people grow in their capacity and their commitment. That's an organizing line. You want people to grow, everyone to grow, everyone in their capacity and their commitment. That's how you build a movement. And I love Jesus' advice about leadership development. He told Peter that he had to become a fisher of men. So what is it like when you fish? You pull the rope tight, you let the line tight, and you let it loose. You pull it too tight or you let it too loose, you lose the fish. That is the process of pushing people, like I did with Taylor, pushing them to take a risk, right? To make an investment, to grow, to have to grow. But then you also just appreciate them. That there's times when you let them off the hook and you just really appreciate whatever they're able to do, so that they continue to feel cared about as they are, but also called to be all that they can be. So that back and forth tension is the fishing tension that develops leaders. And if you miss either part of it, people are going to either just do the same thing over and over again, or they're going to drift away. So you really want to build everything you do in a way that develops leaders, so then in the end you don't bite off more than you can chew, because you have good chewers all over the place. Then, conflict. If you ever read Saul Alinsky, he will say that conflict is a necessary part of the process. I wouldn't go that far. I think conflict is sometimes an inevitable part of the process. So how do you, first of all, prevent unnecessary conflict? You know, you want your offense to be the offense of Christ and not just to be offensive. So how do you prevent unnecessary conflict? Well, you need to surround the work you're going to do with biblical support. And the best way that I know of to do that, if the pastor is on board, is to have a sermon series, not necessarily on immigration, on the foundational principles that will move the church past the cultural captivity to a place of really being open to the Word of God. That's really where you need to start. You need to start about how do we overcome fear with love. You need to start about what it means to love, that Jesus transforms the whole person and the whole family and the whole community and the whole society, and not just saves our souls for heaven. You need to start with what our identity is as Christians and what it means to be part of the body of Christ. You need to start at a foundational level that responds to the cultural captivity of the church. And that provides the foundation that begins to create the church as a community that is convicted of the radical, beautiful, wild call of Jesus. And if you can do that, to whatever extent you can do that, and a good pastor will not try to move people from 0 to 60, right? But gradually to soften the ground, to prepare the soil, that's going to be very important for preventing conflict. What does it mean to move from hostility to hospitality? That's a big one, right? If you can move people down that track, you're much more likely to be able to organize them. Study groups with authorized materials, and by authorized I mean materials that come with a stamp of legitimacy. That's very important for us as evangelicals. We're very suspicious of outsiders. So that's where Welcoming the Stranger is a great book to do a book study with, because it's got the stamp of the National Association of Evangelicals. That's a good stamp, right? So study groups with authorized materials that allow people to think. And then individual conversations with your Gamaliels. You know, you really want to know what's happening on the inside. You want a bigger picture of what's bubbling up in the church than you can have. And that kind of intelligence is going to come from your leaders who are empathetic. Number 2, much easier to put out a little fire than a big fire. So you really don't want to ignore little fires. You want to have your ear to the ground, because when somebody starts getting upset, you don't want to avoid them and talk to someone else about them. Let me just say that again. The natural tendency when you hear that someone is beginning to gun for you is to go find someone you agree with and complain. That's really not very helpful at all. What you have to do is actually go to someone who agrees with you and pray, so that you can then go to your opponent personally. And maybe that's not even the first step. Maybe there's someone your opponent and you both trust that can go first and begin to calm them, begin to listen to them, begin to help them to get to, again, a more movable place, and then you go and meet with them. So try to put out little fires when you can. Don't make them bigger by gossip. Don't try to put them out. You might find out about them from the Gamaliel. And then if you can't, if the church really begins to be in active conflict on the issue, you have to manage the temperature. Remember, we talked about that with hyphates. And you have to be ready to accept delay or loss. And what I mean by delay or loss is sometimes you decide to slow down what you're working on, so that you're not going to stop it, but you're going to slow it down for things to cool down. Or you're going to make a compromise about how much you'll do or how it will be framed. So, you know, that's a hard thing. When you're all on fire, that's a hard thing to accept. But you have to look at the long arc of where you're going, not just what happens in this moment, or be ready to accept loss, that maybe some people are going to leave. So you really do have to make some discernment there, or maybe you're going to leave, but you have to make some discernment there. And I think we want to maintain the unity of the body. You want to maintain in the bond of peace wherever you can. Remember, this is a long haul. I've been 40 years in the wilderness on immigration personally, and it's a long haul. So I really want to suggest that you don't get too attached to an immediate outcome, but you're really you have the long view. So I think that's just some helpful tips that I wanted to give you as we're heading towards the end of this class. And I'm making this video for this week, but if people do have other areas where you want me to create a video, please do let me know. Like I said, I have a request for next week to go deeper on questions of racism and immigration and intersectionality, and I will do that. So thank you.